Hey, I think everyone out there in the gun community is aware of the 4 rules of handgun safety. 4 little rules to help you never have a negligent discharge or have an accident with your firearm if you follow these rules. Well, I think we all know also that some of these rules are misused or misunderstood or sometimes just can't be considered as concrete as some people want to think they are. Today I want to speak about the 4 rules. I specifically want to speak about rule number 4 and how people misinterpret rule number 4. But before I do, let's go over all 4 rules really quick. First off, treat every handgun like it's loaded always. Well, I think we all know that's a little impractical. Now, it's a good idea. Anytime you pick up a gun or you're handed a gun, no matter what anyone tells you, you treat that gun like it's loaded until you have verified that it's not. Now, there's a reason why that little caveat needs to be on the end there. Because if you don't treat a gun like it's loaded, you can't clean it, you can't inspect the bore. You know, there's things you have to do to a gun sometimes for proper maintenance that is not going to allow you to treat that gun like it's loaded. Especially if you do maintenance like replacing a trigger or a firing pin. How are you going to do that if you treat the gun like it's loaded? Always. That's going to make any kind of work you do on your gun very impractical. So the rule should really be treat every handgun like it's loaded always until you have personally verified that it isn't and then it has not left your control. If it leaves your control, verify it again and then move on. Rule number 2, never point the muzzle of your gun at anything you don't want to destroy. That's always a good idea. Now, a lot of people will abuse this rule or ignore it entirely when they try to justify why they like to carry their gun pointed at their, their twig and berries or their femoral artery or femoral artery, depending on whether you're a man or a woman. So a lot of people like to ignore that rule. I would not say that you can ignore that rule when you're pointing your gun at a part of your body that could kill you within seconds if you had an accident, especially if you're carrying it in an appendix carry position and you actually have to put your hand on that gun to draw it. I would never consider that a safe thing to do. But there is an example of a time when you do have to ignore not pointing your muzzle at something that you're not willing to destroy, and that is when you're training, when you're dry firing. When you're dry firing at home, you have to be able to pull that trigger and point that gun somewhere while you're doing it. And that's a very important part of training, dry firing. So once you've assured that the gun is empty, it hasn't left your control, then you can point the muzzle at something like a TV or whatever you want to aim at and actually pull that trigger and not have to worry about destroying what you're pointing at. That's about the only time I say let your muzzle point at something you don't want to shoot. Rule number 3, never put your trigger finger on the actual trigger until you are on target and ready to fire. That's just a good safety rule. Never ever touch the trigger until you're ready to fire the gun, even if that means dry firing. But that rule is pretty much constant. Never put your finger on the trigger unless you're trying to fire the gun, be it dry fire or live fire. All right, now we're to rule number 4, which is what I wanted to talk about today. Rule number 4 is always know your target and what's behind it before you fire. Now, that's a good rule. If you're target shooting or hunting, even whatever you do, make sure that you know what's beyond your target. If you miss your target, you want to know you're not going to hit anything, or at least not anything of any importance. You want to know you have a safe backdrop. But sometimes that's not going to be possible. Sometimes it's going to be imperative that you shoot immediately regardless of the background. You're going to have to make an assessment of risk. You're going to have to make a threat assessment at any given time. And you may have to shoot without knowing what's behind your target. And I'm going to give you an example here. Let's say you're at the mall. There is a baby stroller sitting in the middle of the little rotunda there. You hear people screaming, "Oh my God, he's got a knife, he's stabbing people, he's killing people." You turn around, you look over, and you see a guy with a bloody knife walking away from bodies on the ground, and he's walking towards that baby with the knife above his head. Well, there are storefronts and everything behind him. You don't know who's in those storefronts. Do you wait until you find out before you shoot the bad guy? Or do you decide that the risk to that baby, that present risk to that baby, far outweighs any risk to anybody in that store? Well, of course, You protect the baby. You shoot even though you're not completely sure of your background. You take that risk. The immediate risk to that baby outweighs the need for you to know what's behind your target. And let's take this scenario even a little further. Let's say you see the baby, you hear the screams, you see the bodies, you see the guy with the knife walking towards the baby, but not only are there shops behind, but there's a bunch of frightened people running around willy-nilly behind him. Back and forth, multiple people just running around. Well, if you decide to take a shot at this guy right here, you are risking hitting one of those people. But which risk is greater? The risk of him harming the baby or the risk of you missing and hitting someone behind him? Well, the risk to the baby is immediate and absolute, whereas the risk to people behind him is hypothetical. So you shoot. You take him out. You protect the baby once again. You do a threat assessment and you say, the first threat, the threat from the man with a knife to the baby, like I said, is immediate and it's actual. It's not hypothetical, so you take the shot. A lot of times people will say, oh, you never shoot like that in a crowded mall because you might hit someone behind. And that's just silly. Sometimes carrying a gun means you have to make hard decisions. And a lot of times that might count on you to be able to make proper threat assessments. And when you do make your threat assessment, a clear and present danger outweighs a hypothetical one.